Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar topic is Why is Toforest Johnson on Alabama's death row? And I have the privilege of speaking with Beth Shelburne and Akeriya Muffin Terry about this case. So let me just give some quick introductions. Beth is an Alabama-based independent writer and investigative journalist. She has reported extensively on the crisis in Alabama prisons. Beth is a co-producer of the Academy Award nominated 2025 HBO documentary, The Alabama Solution. And regarding our primary topic today about Toforest Johnson, Beth has investigated the case and created, written, and narrated a podcast series about the case entitled Earwitness. Akeriya, who goes by Muffin, is Toforest's daughter. She's a middle school teacher in Birmingham, Alabama, and she remains in close contact with her father and has been a strong advocate for his innocence. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. It's like very exciting to have the opportunity to meet you both and to speak with you.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, thank you. So DPF, Death Penalty Focus, is an advocacy organization devoted to abolishing the death penalty in California and around the country. And, one of many powerful reasons why the death penalty must be abolished is the persistent occurrence of wrongful convictions. And Toforest's case is just a shocking example of how a man can suffer what is like just really unthinkable, being sentenced to death for a crime he did not commit. And so for those of you who haven't listened to the podcast, like I implore you to do so. It's really incredible. But I wanted to give you some background on the case. Around 1 a.m. on July 19th, 1995, Deputy Sheriff William Hardy was murdered while moonlighting as a security guard at the Crown Sterling Suites Hotel in Birmingham, Alabama. At the time of the murder, Toforest Johnson was with his friend, Ardregas Ford, about 4 miles from the location of the murder. In the podcast, Beth details the investigation and the evidence, and really the lack of evidence. She goes through the trials that resulted in Toforest's wrongful conviction and death sentence, and also takes us through the appeals process. Beth explains and uncovers really a multitude of serious problems and injustices with the case, including the government's failure to disclose that it paid the key witness $5,000 for her testimony. Beth also uncovers information that just shows the complete and total lack of credibility of that witness. The podcast covers also the ongoing legal efforts and advocacy efforts to prove Toforest's innocence and to gain his freedom, and also gives a personal view of Toforest as a father through a conversation with his children. And also, you can find more information about the case, including a link to the podcast at toforestjohnson.com. So enough of me speaking. Beth, let's start with you. You were born and raised and educated in Alabama and have committed so much of your life and your work to promoting justice in the state. How did you get into this work, and how did you first become aware of Toforest's case?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan, for the introduction and the opportunity to speak about this work and to Forest. So I had been a traditional news reporter working in a number of different cities around the United States, and I covered a lot of crime, but it really wasn't until 2012 when I was working back in my hometown of Birmingham that I started thinking about the back end of the criminal justice system and what happens when someone is convicted or pleads guilty and goes away. I think traditional media typically, has treated that part of the story as the end, and they move on to the next crisis to cover. But I started reporting on sex abuse inside Alabama's maximum security prison for women, Tutwiler Prison. In 2012, a group of women had filed a federal complaint alleging that guards had been raping them, sexually harassing them. And the system kept telling me, there's nothing to see here. Okay, well, maybe it's just a few bad apples. And when it was all said and done, and the feds came in and investigated and released findings in 2014, they concluded that it was a horrifically violent and sexualized environment that involved up to 30% of the prison staff and had been going on for the better part of a decade. It had
Hmm.
resulted in pregnancies, and it just was one trauma after another that was happening to these women. And that just really ripped the blinders off my eyes. I realized there is this whole world that I haven't been paying attention to. And so I started reporting on all of the issues in Alabama's prisons, not just the women's prison, but of course the men's, and then became interested in the reasons why our system is in such chaos. Why is it so overcrowded? I did a lot of reporting on our three strikes law, our habitual offender law, which is considered the most draconian in the nation. And started really thinking critically and realizing I need to get out of traditional media because I have like a lot to say and I don't want to feel muzzled. But it was at that tail end of my TV news career that I first heard about Toforest Johnson. I wasn't living in Alabama when the crime happened, and I didn't know about him or his case, but he had a hearing in Jefferson County Court in Birmingham on his appeal challenging this secret reward payment that was made to the key earwitness in his case. And so, because at that point, it was, I think, 2018 or 2019, I was sort of the criminal justice reporter. Our assignment editor said, this old death row case is going to be back in local court. Are you interested? And I was, and read a little bit about the case. I met with Toforest's mother and one of his other daughters, talked to his attorneys, but I knew very little about the case, except that it was purely circumstantial. It was based on the testimony of this one witness that they were calling into question, and also that Toforest was claiming she had been paid a reward in secret. The jury didn't know about it. He didn't know about it. And his legal team didn't know about it for many, many years. So that was my initiation, going and sitting in that 5 hour court hearing and listening to the facts of the case. And after that hearing, I requested the trial transcripts, and there were four trials, so I read all four of them, and that was sort of my holy shit moment, that this is like most certainly a wrongful conviction. And not only that, there's just layer upon layer of corruption and indifference that he's being met with. And so I really started to drill down and think about his case in a podcast format.
And the four trials, is that two that took the for Toforus and two for Ardragus? Is
That's
that
right. Yes. The first two, Ardragus was first, DeForest was second, and each of those trials ended in a mistrial, a hung jury. And then DeForest was tried again. The jury convicted and sentenced him to death. And one of the most rotten things I think the state did is they then tried to convict Ardragus on different witness testimony, a different set of facts that they presented to the jury after they'd already secured a death sentence against Toforest.
Hmm.
And Ardragus was quickly acquitted. The jury voted not guilty.
Thanks, Beth. Muffin. Hi, Muffin. I know you're a middle school teacher and you're actually at the school right now, at your school. Um, you were only 2 years old, I believe, when your father was sentenced. And I was curious, like, were you able growing up to develop a relationship with your father? I know Holman Prison is like something like 3 hours
Ooh.
drive away from Birmingham.
long drive,
Yeah.
long, early mornings, long drives. But throughout the years, we've always remained in contact. Even, being in elementary school, like the early years, he would always write letters. And of course, I cannot read them to save my life because they were in cursive, and his cursive handwriting was just gorgeous. And I'm like, Ma, you gotta read this because I don't know what none of this say, but you gotta write something back for me too. So we've always, connected through letters. My grandma, she would take us down and we'd go see him. He would send beautiful birthday cards, Christmas cards. He'd send belts. He sent, what was the thing you made me? It was a jewelry box. It was made like a piano, like an actual piano. And it had Penny Proud on it because that was my favorite Disney character at the time. But he has always, called if he can, write letters. We gonna go see him. He'll come down. I'm trying to go see him. So that constant communication, it was actually great. Now that I look back on it, it's like you don't have your dad, but you have your dad. You don't have him in the physical, but you actually have him.
And do you have kids of your own now?
Oh yes, two of them.
Two of them. And how do you explain kind of the situation to your own kids? And do they have a relationship? I don't know how old they are, so maybe they're very young.
Yes. So seven, well, one's about to be seven this summer, and 10. I told her, because my son, he's not understanding really, that, he's in prison, he's away, and she's not understanding why he's away. I can only tell her so much without her, like, because she will question you. She's a
Hmm.
kid, she wants to know everything. Like, I'm gonna try to find out if you don't tell me. So I'm gonna try to ask different questions so I can find out. So she asked a lot of questions. Anytime he's able to call us on his tablet, she'd be like, "Is he still in jail?" And I was like, "Yes." And I'd be like, "Well, we only got 15 minutes on his phone call, so come on, girl, because you taking all my time. I gotta share my time with you." So they get to talk to Pop Pop all the time. Whenever he called Blue, we have to split our 5 minutes up. I get five, you get five, you get five. Then I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna shoot y'all away. But yes.
Well, it's great that in that like incredibly difficult situation, you've been able to like build that bond and like pass it on to your kids as well with your father. Thanks so much. Beth, I listened to the podcast for a second time in preparation. I feel like I learned so much. I was amazed, as I mentioned to you earlier, how candid so many people were with you and how they really kind of opened up, even when it seemed to be against their interests. I was really surprised by the extensive interviews with the lead detective on the case, Tony Richardson. And, he seemed to really it make it clear that it wasn't so much about finding the actual perpetrator, but it was about finding a perpetrator. And like facts seem to be kind of secondary. So can you speak to that and why that is?
Yeah, we were so appreciative that Tony Richardson was willing to talk with us. It was myself and a producer that I worked with, Mara McNamara, and he was at first reluctant, but kind of kept talking when I initially reached out to him. And I think we talked on the phone for 20 minutes as he was saying, I don't want to talk on the record. But he was continuing to talk, and then he called me back a few days later and had decided to speak. And so we knew that he was really instrumental in this investigation not proceeding in the way that it should have, because we had access to the full investigative file and had kind of done an audit on what happened from start to finish that we unpack in episode 4 of the series. Um, but we really wanted to give him the time and space to tell us his experience in investigating this case. Um, I knew that he would likely say things that, I didn't agree with at best, but like could also be just totally false. But we kind of talked about it ahead of time, what strategy we would use. And we really did want to meet him where he was It's unusual to get that kind of access. Same with the original prosecutor, Jeff Wallace, who also spoke to us on the record. And so, even though we felt very strongly that this was a horrific injustice, and we make it very clear starting in episode one that I had already been doing years of reporting on the case, and this was not like, is he guilty or is he innocent? This is a wrongful conviction, and that's the story that I'm going to tell. But we kind of met these particular system actors where they were at that moment and tried to not be adversarial. We had to be fair because when they were stating things that were incorrect, we had to correct the record. But I think that that approach really allowed listeners of the podcast and certainly us to be informed of a lot of anxieties that existed during the investigation that he was able to describe. And then if you listen, there's like a lot of subtext to the answers that he gives. He can be defensive at times, but then he'll also say things like he finally admitted he had many regrets about his handling of juvenile witnesses in this case, particularly a 15-year-old girl named Yolanda Chambers, who was the original witness that, officers really coerced and put incredible pressure on. And we kind of unpacked that whole saga for her in episode 3. So he explains it as this was, a colleague that was killed. That's the highest stakes of any kind of police investigation. But he was feeling grief and anger and outrage and was operating on emotion. And if you look at, best practices in officer involved shootings or when an officer is killed, typically another agency will investigate because when you have those kinds of emotions at play, you're not thinking clearly as an investigator. So I think that was happening. And then also just the pressure from the top to get somebody in custody.
Yeah, it did feel like the fact that a law enforcement officer was the victim played a pivotal role in kind of the rush to judgment.
Absolutely.
And that they actually had a personal relationship. They knew each other, the lead investigator and the victim. So yeah. So Muffin, what stood out to you when you heard the podcast for the first time? Was there anything you learned that you weren't aware of?
I was, when I listened to the podcast, I was like, whoa, my mind was blown. I had to text Beth. I was like, what? I was like, Beth, I was like listening as everybody else was listening. I'm like, I need more. I wanted to keep listening. Like, I didn't want to take a break. And so listening to the lead detective talk, he kind of always made me mad. Like, I did not like him. And I was like, I just don't like this man as a person because it's like, you have the facts at this point, but you're kind of ignoring it. This person is not doing what they say was doing or was what it was supposed to be. And it's just like, and you're fine with it. So that made me mad. I was mad at Yolanda Chambers for a minute too. But then listening to the story, she almost kind of became a victim to me. And I was like, okay, well, I can't really be too mad at her. I'm mad because you placed him somewhere he really wasn't. But listening to the podcast, it was phenomenal. Like I cried maybe on 3 episodes or so. Um, but that podcast, it really took me on a roller coaster.
Yeah, it is really incredible. So I'll say it again. If you haven't listened to the podcast, like please do. Um, Also, Muffin, were you part of that conversation in the last episode? I think it's the last episode with all of Toforest's kids. I thought that that was
Yeah.
just like such a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, I was there. We were all sitting around a table, and it was just so lovely to be sitting around my siblings because we haven't sat around each other like that in a while due to us and our circumstances, and now we're all grown and we all have different lives, and so to sit around the table and laugh and talk and get to know Beth more, I was at peace. I was happy. I was like, I wish we could do this like every Sunday or every Saturday. We
Yeah,
had
thank you.
food too.
It really
Yeah.
came, it really came through. So Beth, you are, as you mentioned, like you routinely investigate abuse and injustice within the legal system, but you picked this case specifically to devote like so much time and energy into this case. What really like drew you in to Forrest's case specifically?
Well, that's right. I don't do a lot of reporting on wrongful convictions. That's just not been my focus. It's kind of like its own genre. But the injustice in this case was so outrageous and so protracted that it had gone on and on and on and sort of happened at every single turn. The more that I learned about the case, I couldn't believe it. And oh my God, then this happened. And then, it's like you go, that's why I think it lent itself to the podcast format because there are so many twists and turns, and the absurdity sort of keeps growing. The more we learn about the lack of evidence and how strong Toforest's alibi is, and then the sort of defiance by the state to keep defending this conviction no matter what. I thought that so all of that, I really wanted to unpack it. I wanted to understand how this happened. I really honestly wanted to just say, can I just go back and like get my hands on every piece of paper that exists from this case, all the transcripts, the investigative files. We had, I think, 50 hours of archival audio of police interrogating people. That's a
Hmm.
lot of tape. There were just boxes and boxes and boxes of files, but I really wanted to try to figure out how someone gets railroaded like this on so little evidence. And I thought that the case also really embodied some of the real systemic problems in our criminal justice system, not just with wrongful convictions, but really anybody, particularly young Black men, like DeForest was when he was convicted. But also, communities of color, the way that the police really exploited these young witnesses. There was a lot of very harsh treatment of young female witnesses in this case. I think that it also embodies the pay to play system of our criminal justice system. It was not lost on us that Ardregis's family was able to fundraise and hire one of the best capital defense attorneys in the state of Alabama. And DeForest's family was not able to do that. And so he had court appointed attorneys that were paid very little. Um, so there was that element. I think it was an interesting time in our criminal justice system in the mid 90s and the era of the super predator. And we were sending away so many young Black men for these exorbitant sentences. And that was also, the height of the death penalty machine, people getting a lot of death sentences. So it had all of that. And it just felt like an ideal case to unpack. But I think at the heart of it, I just felt like I wanted to illuminate Forrest's innocence and to advocate, that this case be overturned because it really is, at the end of the day, just a horrific injustice that needs to be made right.
Yeah. With respect to the interrogations, I mean, I've seen in many other cases where wrongful convictions, kind of at the root of those cases, are kind of coerced confessions or pressure put on key witnesses. When you listen to all those many, many hours of interviews of witnesses, like what stuck out to you, or what like kind of conclusions can you come to about like the techniques that were used and whether it actually gets to the truth or to something else?
It was really terrifying, actually. It was sobering to know that this is how things went. Hopefully, things have improved. The investigative techniques have improved, but there was so much confirmation bias going into it, and this choice that detectives repeatedly gave to witnesses, to suspects. You can be a witness or you can be a defendant. That's kind of a Sophie's choice. I mean, many of the people that they were bringing in had absolutely nothing to do with the crime. We know that right after the murder happened, there were many, many investigative agencies that were assisting, and they fanned out in like a 2 or 3 mile radius around the hotel and were just pulling over mainly young Black men, but were pulling over everybody. And they brought a lot of them into the police station that night or the next day. And that's what they were saying to all of them. You can be a witness or a defendant. And so, I tried to press Detective Tony Richardson on that, and you hear it in the interview. He's very dismissive. That's just a tactic. That's not really a big deal. But my point was, what if you're not a witness or a defendant? When you're only giving somebody two choices, you're sort of like front loading whatever you're trying to yield from this interview. And he was dismissive. Oh, well, we'll eventually come around, which of course was not the case. But the tactics were appalling and really terrifying and heartbreaking to listen to Forrest and Ardregas really hold the line in their interrogations. Neither one of them ever broke down. I mean, hours and hours of being interrogated in a really hostile way. And they stuck to their stories. They refused to lie. But they also trusted that the system would work because they knew they were innocent. And that's what's so heartbreaking is, even going to trial, Toforest told his cousin, Tony Green, who you hear in the podcast, that don't worry about, taking out loans to get me an attorney because I didn't do this. So I'm going to go home. I didn't do this. The jury's not going to, because he trusted that the truth would come out, the truth would prevail, that the system would work, and it just didn't.
Yeah, that comment that the detective made about this concept, like you're either a witness or you're a defendant, obviously that's just an incredibly false choice. And the fact that one of the alibi witnesses who directly contradicted the first key witness, the 15-year-old girl,
Mhm.
she absolutely was steadfast in saying, like, this is not true. I was there. And yet I think she ended up in jail
She
for a
did
period of time, which is like
5 months. Yeah. As a
it
16-year-old in jail for 5 months. And honestly, that is one of the parts of this. I mean, aside from what has happened to Forrest, which is like unimaginable, there were all these other people that got swept up in this that were really harmed. And she was one of them. And we were not able to speak to her directly, but we spoke to her uncle. Her name is Latanya, and he said she has never been the same. I mean, it's very hard for her to trust people. That was truly a horrific experience for her. And, it has shaped the rest of her life in a bad way.
Yeah, there's just like the radiating out of trauma from this case is really striking.
It is.
Yeah. Muffin, do you to kind of move to a more positive for a moment, do you have some memories with your father over the years that you could share with us? And were you able to like celebrate milestones in your life with your dad, even though he couldn't be physically present with you?
Yes. So graduating college, he's on the phone. I'm so proud of you, princess, because I'll be mad. He could try to call my daughter princess, and I'm like, no, that's my name. So you gotta find her another name. But graduations, getting married, he's just all in it. He talks to my husband all the time. Anytime we get on the phone, they just having the best conversation. Me getting jealous again, spending all my time. Um, so it's very hard creating memories when he's inside. But just knowing that I can still tell him he's always so happy, so grateful. And I'm like, I hate giving you all this good news and you can't really share it with me. But he's always just so energetic, so happy. The kids making good grades, what they got for Christmas, what we doing for their birthday. I can't wait to come home. We're going to the jump park. He's on the basketball court getting ready because he said when he coming home, he's taking the kids. And I said, go ahead, have a good time. So being able to share those memories with him, it just really lets me know I have a really, really great dad. Because although he's not here with me, he's able to just give me all the love that I need. He's doing more than anybody that's not in prison is doing. So creating memories and being able to share them with him, and he's just so ecstatic and happy about it. It just really makes my day every day. So I try to be super positive every day because he's always nice and looking at the bright side of everything. So getting to share those memories and let him be a part of our life while there is just a godsend.
Yeah, it's like incredibly resilient, and just that he can, after what he's gone through and continues to go through, that he can
Yes,
be a loving, present, person
the
in
best
your family.
dad.
Yeah, it's incredible. Um, so Beth, in the podcast, this might have been kind of one of the big moments for me. You reveal some extraordinary evidence about the prosecution's key witness, Violet Ellison. So it's kind of like the second key witness after the first one fell apart. So you directly kind of undermine her credibility, uncover new evidence. Can you like talk about how that came about, the significance, and maybe your like reaction when kind of learn this new information?
Yeah, I mean, I typically do not investigate private citizens like that, but we realized this entire case hinges on her testimony and her credibility. And so we have to look into her background, what would have been motivating her, who is she, what does her community think of her? Because you don't really see that when somebody comes into a courtroom and takes the stand. You see just a sliver of what they are saying about themselves under oath. Um, and there's a lot more to a person. So I had mixed emotions about going down that road, but knew that we had to do our due diligence and do it. It wasn't surprising to me to see her financial background because I had already been to her house and spoken to her once, and I knew, she was living in a pretty hard scrabble area of Birmingham. But, she had issues with bankruptcy and a lot of um, financial issues that I think could be a motivation to pursue reward money or come forward with information if a big reward was offered, and it was in this case. They paid her 5,000, but the full reward was actually $20,000, which is a large reward, especially in the mid 90s. Um, what we did not expect to find, but did, was incredibly negative perceptions of her from neighbors and from members of her own family. And what emerges is the story of somebody who is essentially estranged from everyone in their own family because of sort of unethical or meddling type behaviors. The character portrait that emerged from her was not someone that you would ever want to rest a case on, any case, let alone a death penalty case. That, her word can't be trusted, that she's very motivated by money. I think her grandson called her a scam artist, and that she has a son who was his father, who has a long history of drug use and has been in and out of jail. And that could also be a motivating factor for her to involve herself in criminal investigations. We discovered while we were kind of doing this background on her that she had been a key witness in 5 other criminal cases for the state. And that kind of put her in a new category that we weren't expecting to find, where she was sort of like a serial witness for the state. We were never able to uncover anything solid that said she was on their payroll or that she was, you know, it wasn't really clear what her relationship was, but what we uncovered as far as circumstantial information from family members, that a motivating factor for her was protection of her son and her adult son, and trying to get preferential treatment for him in his criminal legal life.
And none of this apparently came out during Toforest's trial. It was all
Yeah, 20 years after the fact.
years
I mean,
later.
yes, this is the type of information that his attorneys should have been gathering when he was being prosecuted, or when the state was building their case. The investigation that they did at the time was really just absolutely non-existent. They, presented very few witnesses and information, and didn't really even cross-examine Violet Ellison on the stand. I mean, if you read the trial transcripts, it's jaw-dropping, how very little they did in defending Toforest. So yeah, we knew that it was potentially helpful to him and enlightening on the case, so we had to do our due diligence and publish it. But it really is a shame that this is coming out so long after the fact that he was convicted.
So with this new information and about this key witness, and also the lack of like presenting alibi witnesses, like all of this factual evidence that you've really laid out so clearly, it seems like there's many prominent Alabamans, including people directly involved with the case, who are calling for a new trial. Um, can you talk about the current position of the DA who actually prosecuted the case against DeForest? So this is the guy who put him in prison and obtained a death sentence against DeForest.
Yeah, I mean, that's another reason folks should listen to the podcast, because so rarely do you get to sit down with a former prosecutor and talk about a case like this and kind of hear him going through his own evolution and how he views the case. We talked to Jeff Wallace over a period of 2 years, in several different interviews. And when we learned that information about Violet Ellison, we took it to him and had like a very candid conversation where he admitted that his opinion of the evidence had changed. I mean, he has supported a new trial for Toforest for a long time, but he feels, he told us it was feeling stronger and stronger about the lack of credibility of the evidence, the more we told him. At the same time, he feels like he's kind of a cog in this machine, and there's only so much that he can do. And he feels like he's done what he can do. And that's very frustrating for a lot of listeners, because people want folks to do more. They want, people to say more. And the fact that he has supported a new trial is extraordinary, but I think he kind of speaks to how our system is not really set up to self-correct, that even when a prosecutor is calling into question a capital conviction, the Attorney General's office, who's defending the state's position in this, which is the conviction, and that is their position. They defend convictions at all costs, no matter what. They see that as their job. They don't think that this position by the original prosecutor counts for anything. They're calling it, it's just an opinion, and it has no legal weight. And so, that kind of gets us to this extraordinary headspace that often happens in our criminal legal system, where this doesn't make sense logically anymore. Like, what are we even doing? And I think it's important to unpack that in a case like this. It's not satisfying for listeners, because they just leave with this sense of outrage, but that really is real. That's where we are. So Yeah, I wish it was different, and we're going to stay on this story. And I cannot wait to be there when Toforest is released. And I still do have hope that that will happen. Um, but that's the kind of extraordinary place where we are, is we have the current district attorney in the county where he was convicted, who has called for a new trial with the support of the original prosecutor, calling for and supporting a new trial, and the attorney general's office trying to prevent that from happening.
So it's a battle between truth and kind of like this concept, which is so strange about just finality. Like once a decision is made, we don't want to reverse it.
Yeah.
It is incredible. It's really incredible. So where does the case currently stand,
Oh,
like
I should
legally?
mention, yeah, there, TaForest still has an appeal in active in Jefferson County Court. It's in front of a new judge, and this includes a call for a new trial. And so I'm hopeful that this is a new set of eyes, a new mind to kind of look over everything that's happened, all of the new discoveries about this ear witness. She seems to be taking her time looking at it, so I'm going to hope that's a good sign. But that's where the case stands. I think somebody asked in a question, they had heard there were no legal avenues left. There are still legal avenues, and there is hope. TeForest does not have an execution date, and he still has outstanding appeals. And so I'm kind of resting in that this court is going to make it right.
We can only hope at this point and continue the work and lift the case up as like that's why we're here is to spread the word and bring attention. So I understand, Muffin, that you've been involved with advocacy work on behalf of your dad and that you and Beth have appeared together before. This isn't the first time. Can you share like what has been impactful and hopeful for you in your advocacy, like an event or an action that you've participated in?
I love the one that we had in the park, and we got to walk to the billboard sign. That was my favorite one. Just actually seeing all the people I don't know, people from all different walks of life, just coming in support. That blows my mind every single time. Anytime I do an event with Beth, I'm always mind blown because I'm like, these are people I don't know these people, and they are just so like supportive. Like they're
Mhm.
ready to go. They're ready to go march right now. And so I'm always just like, and I always tell my dad, Dad, this event went so great. You have all these people here, they're super passionate about what we're doing. They want to get you home just like your family wants to get you home. So doing all these events and seeing all these different people, I'm meeting new people, I'm learning different stuff. So
Mhm.
it's been so memorable. And I was just like, I I couldn't be any more grateful because I felt like as I was younger, I was stuck. I was like, I don't know what can I do? I'm just a kid. Like, how can I help him? I don't know what I can do. But now being grown and being able to go out and talk, because I've never seen myself as an advocate. Because I told Beth the first time I said, I'm so nervous to get in front of these people and talk. But now I'm always ready to go do it. I'm like, anytime they need me, I'm ready, let's go. I'm ready to go talk. Let's get this out there. So that's been my favorite thing about this. This has been some of the best years of my life, being able to finally advocate for my dad and have people I don't know about his story and look into it and have people watching listening to the podcast. So that's a big thing for me this year.
That's really cool. I saw that you had met like a descendant of one of the like Scottsboro boys and that like
That was my
that
favorite.
historical like wrongful conviction. It's like such an incredible, injustice that was done long ago and that tying that to now. Like how did that come about? Like what can you tell us a little bit about that?
it was the last event me and Beth did. And
Hmm.
we were, because I had my daughter that day,
Yeah.
and we were talking, and she came up and we were speaking. I was like, oh my gosh. I was
Yeah, it
kind
was
of
the
like starstruck.
granddaughter. Yeah,
Yeah.
she actually recently relocated to Alabama. She's lived elsewhere for many, many years, and she lives in Mobile, I believe. But she is the granddaughter of the last Scottsboro boy who was released. And so that was really an incredible moment.
I loved it. I was like, girl, give me a
Yeah,
hug. Oh my
yeah.
goodness. I was just
Yeah.
ecstatic.
So in the Alabama solution, which is such a powerful documentary, again, recommend that everybody watch the Alabama solution on HBO. I was just so horrified and heartbroken by the conditions in Alabama prisons. And also I'm just thinking of like what Toforest must be experiencing. I know that since he was taken to death row at Holman Prison on October, I believe it was October 30th, 1998, there's something like close to 70 people have been executed in Alabama. So that's like kind of he's experienced that like firsthand on that death row and at Holman Prison. And yet, people like Toforest and like that the prison activists, the inmates in the Alabama solution, like they survive, they resist and persist through these like inhumane conditions. And and also knowing, in Toforest's case, that he's innocent of this crime. Um, I guess
Yeah.
one thing is like what, and either or both of you can speak to this, like what are the conditions that Toforest is facing? What is he dealing with? Um, And how does he, I mean, it seems like he's a really hopeful person and is able to be really loving with his family. Like, how do you think he like holds on to that hope?
Ooh,
So,
Muffin, I'll let you answer that.
Man, it's so crazy. Um, I've always wondered, how are you just so happy, so
Yeah.
hopeful every time we get on this phone? But it's always, I know I'm coming home. He just holds on to that. And because he holds on to it, I hold on to it dearly. So anytime, like even if he called and I'm in the middle of a moment, I'm mad. I don't even want to tell him what I'm mad about. But I'm gonna tell him. And then we're gonna laugh when we get
Mhm.
done. So he's just always so hopeful, so happy. We're almost like two peas in a pod because we
Yeah.
can sit and joke on the phone for the whole 15 minutes. I kid you not. And when we hang up, he's like, I'm called back. Just wait a minute. In another 15 minutes, we back joking. We just talking about stuff and just being able to share what we do every day, share what our kids do, what's next and up and coming. I think that gives him hope to keep on pushing and keep going because he's never been down. Anytime we on the phone, it's always, hey, princess, what you doing? What you got going on? Always upbeat, never just, I had a horrible day today. I hate today. I've never heard him say anything just condescending at all. And so him having hope, I'm like, well, if you can be happy all day, every day, let me go be happy every day. Even coming to teach
Mhm.
these kids, let me just put a smile on my face because I know somebody finna bother me. But he's just such a happy person. Like I can't even stop smiling. That's us. Just
Yeah.
laughing, joking,
And you
playing.
know what, Dan, Toforest attorneys have told me the
Oh,
same thing, that, he lifts them up. He is the one that sustains hope and will tell them, it's going to be okay. Let's stay hopeful. He's just an incredibly resilient person. I do want to let people know that are tuning in, people think of death row and it's this horrific place and people are isolated, but it is a community.
mhm.
And the men on Alabama's death row have a very strong sense of community. They call it life row. They don't call it death row. They call it life row because they are alive. The state has not taken that yet. And I think that Toforest is very well regarded on Life Row. I think that because he has such a presence of mind and is, so physically and mentally strong, he's there for a lot of the other folks who may not be doing as well. I think he looks out for some of the men down there that really need our higher needs. But this is a little kind of incredible fact for anybody who's seen the Alabama Solution. One of the main whistleblowers in the film, Robert Earl Council, who goes by Kinetic Justice. When we were making the film, I was talking to Kinetic on the phone, and he asked me, "Hey, I heard that you made this podcast. How's Lil Russ doing?" And Toforest's nickname on Life Row and in his community is Lil Russ. And I said, "How do you know Toforest?" And he said he served time at Holman Prison for a very brief time, and he was the runner from the centralized part of the prison over to death row and would take trays over to death row, and got to know Toforest just speaking through the bars when he was delivering meals, and they became friends. So I think that that just kind of speaks to these conditions are horrific and awful, but human beings find a way to persist and connect with each other's humanity. And I have certainly seen that in learning about Toforest and the incredible community he has. His family is just the love that y'all have, Muffin, is so inspiring and beautiful. And I think that's what makes the case even harder, that this is someone who has so much love around him, so much love to give, has, 5 children, 19 grandchildren that this man has. He's pop to 19 kids that want him out. So, you know, I think that at the end of the day, I try to always remember that, no matter how hard life is for us, it's harder for other folks that are fighting a different fight. And Toforest is such an example of like living in the moment and staying positive and hopeful. And I just have such admiration for him.
Yeah, thank you both so much. I mean, you've really brought through your podcast, Beth, like incredible like truth telling and with the Alabama solution as well. And I know was so angry in a way, like hearing the podcast that you have this innocent man that's been sentenced to death, and it's just the injustice of it is overwhelming. And then the same thing with the Alabama solution when you see what's going on there. And yet, another truth is like the humanity that those, activists, inmates bring to, that they're going to fight for justice and they have love for one another and they care about like what's happening to their fellow inmates. And also just the way, Muffin, that you've brought like just showing the humanity of your father and your family and how he can persist. I thank you both so, so much. And yeah, I feel grateful just to be able to lift up your voices. Yeah, so thank you so, so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for the opportunity. Can I just say really quickly, for people that want a call to action, that want to do something to help, toforestjohnson.com is the website, and there is a get involved button. Same with the Alabama Solution. You can go to the alabamasolution.com and there's a get involved button. I know that doesn't feel incredibly satisfying when we want to like go march and set things on fire and scream because that's what the system deserves, really. But those are the best ways for you to find things that you can get involved in.
Yeah. So, Melissa at the Greater Birmingham Ministries asked me to share a few things that,
Oh,
like, some
good,
of these
good.
are easy things, listen to the podcast, share it, rate it, spread the word to friends and family about the case and about the podcast. You can follow the campaign on Instagram at Toforest Johnson. And also, and we'll have a follow-up email with this information. if you're so moved, like you can reach out directly to Greater Birmingham Ministries if you would like to plan an event or connect people who have a public platform, or you want to learn just about more ways to support the campaign to free Toforest. So we will send that information in a follow-up email. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you will join the efforts to free Toforest. And Beth and Muffin, it was just so great to meet you and be with you. So appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I loved it.
I loved it. Yeah, take good care.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.